Okay. So first we open for public comments. Mr. Pennington.
Thank you very much. This is now the time period for public comment on agenda items before the Pupil Services Committee. We have 2 registrants, both of whom spoke at the prior committee meeting, so I will not repeat the instructions. Our first speaker is Megan Reichel.
Oh,
Yes, we need the timer.
In the interim, I'm Megan Reichel, I live in East Goshen.
Give me 1 sec, I'm sorry.
Okay. I look forward to Dr. Ranieri's presentation on social emotional learning. In previewing the slides and the agenda, I appreciate the focus on suicide and violent risk assessment statistics. From a personal standpoint, one of my children has been told to die by suicide by a classmate in elementary, middle, and high school. Each time, it was said to them by a different person. Unfortunately, it was all handled well through the schools. Most recently, my child perseverated, which is a feature of their disability, as a student was not wearing their mask correctly over their nose. My child asked politely that the student wear it correctly, as they were all seated at the same table. In turn, my child was told the world would be better without them, and they should not be here. I believe that sometimes hurt people who hurt people. The students who said these things, and frankly all students, can benefit from social emotional learning with a focus on understanding and empathy of differences and restorative justice. My child benefits from social emotional learning as an IEP provision. And fortunately, the most recent kind of curriculum that they were going over was conflict resolution. Studies have shown students need to feel safe, physically and emotionally, for optimum learning. Reviewing the trends and supports in place is important. Thank you for your time.
Sarah Getz.
Sarah again, I just wanted to say that with a kindergartner that's coming home using the language and the lingo, the social emotional learnings, teaching his younger sister how to work through her emotions at 3 has been really rewarding and really beneficial to our whole family. So I appreciate that it's starting in kindergarten, and it will be something that will follow them all the way through. Hearing from other parents speaking to the middle school and high school curriculum is amazing that is going on finally in schools. And I am encouraged and happy that it's happening here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. At this point, we're going to, I'm going to ask for approval of our minutes from our last meeting.
Yes.
Mr. Goodell, Dr. Zipsky,
Yes.
Dr. Shaw. Yes. Thank you. 4-0. And now we are tuned in to Dr. Ranieri for our presentation on social emotional learning. Would you like us to ask questions as we go on, or should we wait until?
You're welcome to ask questions as we go. I'm certainly fine with that. And I have Dr. Steve Warner, our Assistant Director of Pupil Services, who's joining me tonight, and we'll be talking about some of the slides. And this is something that is such an important topic. It's something that we're really focusing, especially on this year. It's been a focus in our district. Basically almost for the last 10 years, but it certainly during this pandemic has escalated. So we're going to talk about tonight some of our data, what those trends are, what are the trends what are we seeing, and then how are we responding to them in this situation. So at this time, I'm going to have Steve talk a little bit about our suicide and violent risk assessments, and SRA is suicide risk assessments, and VRA is violent risk assessment.
Thank you. So what you see here is looking at the suicide risk assessments that we calculated or captured with students over the past 4 years. So the SRAs went from around 171 up to 216, and then obviously that 2019-20 is going to be impacted by COVID mid-year down to 143 and 151 SRAs working up with students last year. The VRAs slightly lower, actually significantly lower, started off around 38 when we started to capture this data a couple of years ago. Again, similar to the SRA numbers that we saw, was a 4-year high there with 65 in 2018, 2019. And then those numbers sort of trickle off again, likely due to the COVID the interaction with students. So this school year, we implemented a couple of different initiatives to better capture the numbers and to be able to not only capture the event, but also know kind of where they were occurring, how severe they were, to better put supports in place and identify areas that we needed to address as a district, but also at a school level. So you look at what this is showing is our SRA, suicide risk screening, SRS is a suicide risk screening, then SRA is a suicide risk assessment. So we added that screening piece this year to again capture really the severity and be able to put in tiered supports and interventions with students based on the severity of the claim that the student was expressing. So for this school year, as of December 29th, you see our numbers for SRS are up to 80, and then the SRAs are 156. And I do want to clarify, if it is an SRS, that's where the counting stopped. So the SRAs do not count the SRSs, if that makes sense. So it escalated. If we did the screening and it escalated to an SRA, we only counted that once in the SRA numbers. So for the VRS, the violent risk screener, the VRA is the violent risk assessment. So these screenings where we have a student making a violent threat towards others or just a group in general, we're seeing that number up to a 44. So that's an increase from where we've been in previous years. And then our violent risk assessment that escalated up to a severe or substantial threat. We see those numbers at 11 right now at this point in the school year.
And in previous years, your VRA numbers were probably a little bit higher because we didn't have a screening. So I think you'll see a reduction in VRA from previous years to this year. So moving forward, we'll continue to have the screenings included in our numbers. This is halfway through the school year, and we're already higher than we were previously. Okay, we have there's a couple measures, and I'll go that we have in place that we monitor how students are doing from a threat perspective. We have our SysCloud and our Mimecast, which is through our district, that is monitoring our students' emails, what is being sent out, as well as their searches on the internet. And so we've done welfare checks. Last year, it was a total of 12 for this purpose. So far this year, as of December 1st, we had 12. I can share with you, sitting in here tonight, if you saw me get up a couple of times, we had a student that wrote something about wanting to die and not ending his life, and we needed to do a welfare check. And that was done on one of our high school students as we were in this meeting this evening. We will follow up tomorrow with that student and do a suicide risk assessment and evaluate whether or not additional services are needed, and we'll talk about what some of those supports are that will be put into place. The police do go out to the house, they check to see if the child is safe, they talk to the parents, they give them information about local resources for them to access. In this particular situation, the parents were not very cooperative unfortunately, and felt as though it was not an accurate representation of the child. So it's really critical that we follow up in the morning with that student and make sure that they are safe. So those are the two things that we do within our school system that have been instituted in the last couple of years. In the last, it started not at the beginning of the 18-19 school year, but during the 18-19 school year, a program called Safe to Say Something was started, and that's an anonymous tip line that takes place. It's free to us. We are required to participate in that. I want to share the totals at the top are based from the inception of the program, so it will not match the 3 columns below. So for example, we've had, since the program started, 399 tips. So when I look across, a total of 60 suicide, a total of 38 self-harm, 36 depression, anxiety, 7 substance abuse. So I gave that to you. I only reported where we are from 1920, 2021, 21, 22, kind of reflecting where we are with during this pandemic. Again, I didn't include 18, 19. It wasn't a full year, so it really would not give them an accurate representation of prior COVID to after COVID or during COVID. But I do want you to just notice that where we are as far as our numbers are concerned, last year there were less tips, was significantly less, but we are definitely on that upswing. Suicide was 15 total for the year, in 1920 was 23. Self-harm, we're at 6. Depression of 4, substance abuse 3. So there is definitely an increase. It's based on the prior 2 years. Here are other ones. So this slide I would say is like harm to self. The highlights of that, this is harm to others, and this will be involving weapons, threats against school, planned attack, bullying, cyberbullying. If you recall, in December, there were quite a few incidences that occurred that involved social media that got exasperated in many of our secondary buildings that were threats either against a student or the school. And we see that in our increases at 13 and 21, 22 under threat against school. That's a huge increase compared to any of the other years. All of those are investigated, and we do a violent risk screening or violent risk assessment on any of these types of tips that come through. And then they would be included in the numbers that Steve reported previously. Okay. Talk a little bit about attendance. Okay. This was put in place several years ago, student attendance, the individual plan. They're called SAFEs. When a student has more than 6 unlawful absences, we need to complete a SAFE. Last year, in 2021, we had unlimited parent notes because of the COVID situation. We had changed our attendance guidelines for that. If you look currently in 21, 22, we're already at 154 SAFEs that are conducted, and we're only less than halfway through the school year. So we will far exceed that 316 from last year. So even with having unlimited parent notes, we still had over 300 students that had more than 6 unlawful absences. So attendance is an issue. There are other data that we analyze. We have our effectiveness measures that will be coming out at the end of the second quarter of the school year, which will be happening soon. And so by February, we'll have some other reports to be able to look at, and I think we'll be able to share with you. So we'll get into a little bit more data about grades, participation in extracurricular activities, some discipline data as well. So we'll be able to follow up on that. But I wanted to share some of the highlights of the things that we're seeing as far as the risks that that we're noticing. Before I move into the supports that we have in place, are there any questions about what's been reported so far?
I'm just wondering about the attendance in 2021. So that's COVID related attendance, correct?
Correct. This is when we were on. This is when we were virtual for the majority of the year.
So these students were absent while they were home?
Correct. Yes.
Yes, and that is, as I talked about virtual learning, one of those pieces definitely last year was the accountability for students. So when you're learning virtually, you may log on, but you may forget to check in at a certain time, and you may be marked absent. And so last year, because that remote option, whether we were fully remote or whether we had that option still in place even at the end of the school year, that accountability piece was definitely a struggle. And I do think that students definitely value being in an environment where there is some basic accountabilities. It's just showing up to class on time, simply coming to school. And those are skills also that students need to have.
So that was the anomaly year.
Yes.
2021, okay.
Right, and I would, just a question, Leanne, as far as last year with the SAFEs, it was also more challenging to put them into place because of the difficulty of having access to students and to families to be able to sit down and have a conversation about what some strategies would be to improve attendance. So I think being in person this year is helping us to better develop those plans for students. But that accountability piece, we're still in a spot where, because of the experience last year, we're still working towards getting back to having those simple expectations.
And we went back to our previous attendance guidelines and having a maximum of 15 parent notes. So, you would anticipate there could be more SAFEs as a result of that. So we would have assumed last year we would have had less because of the unlimited, but the lack of access to those students. When students are not engaged, it's very difficult when they're in that remote learning to engage them. And so that was a challenge. There are many more, and we can talk about that at another meeting, but there are many more resources that have been put in place for attendance purposes, and we're employing them as well. So that's some of the things that we have in place.
I just very general question. Do the SAFEs then, do they produce data that shows that their attendance improves as a result of the plan?
Not necessarily. I mean, there are some, obviously, that yes, and there are programs through the county as well as the Chester County Intermediate Unit, like there are truancy programs, some that actually go into the homes. They're all done supportively. Some are incentives, like even like a gift card that you could earn by going. There are a variety of different programs. So if families are willing to allow and participate, we definitely see an increase in that. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and the majority of these, I would say, are at the secondary level. We do certainly have them at the elementary level, but the majority of the ones that you see that are SAFEs are, I'd say at least 80% are at the secondary level.
It seems to be a theme for the secondary.
It is. It's very difficult when they don't want to engage them if they're in that virtual environment. Okay, so now what are some of the things that we're doing to put some supports in place because of this? So this is some of the positive pieces of this, and Steve's going to talk a little bit about some of our supports that we have.
Right, so the programs and people here that we'll highlight were the 12 mental health specialists. If you recall, last year we made the decision to increase from 9 mental health specialists to 12. And they are fully staffed now in all of our buildings, and we're seeing a really great turnaround to be able to provide that support for students. We also have counselors in all of our buildings, 1 at each elementary, 3 at the middle school level, and 5 at the high school level. We also have an intervention specialist, 1 for each feeder pattern. They mostly stay at the high school level, but they're also resources for the rest of that feeder. We also made an investment for our APT, Achieve, Progress, and Transition program. We expanded to all 3 of our high schools this year. And a lot of our buildings have successfully implemented positive behavior support plans over the past year. And that also serves as a tier 1 intervention for all of our students, just to really reward some of those pro-social and positive behaviors that we want to see from students, and really give them the opportunity to get that positive reinforcement. The second step curriculum is what we heard about from one of our program, health advocates in place for our staff.
And I think at some point, Dr. Ulmer may be able to provide some more information as far as staff and what types of things that are in place for them. We just need to be careful that we're not breaking confidentialities with sharing some of those. One of the questions that had come up earlier when we were putting the presentation together is where are we as far as do we have adequate number of counselors in our buildings and things. There are guidelines that are put out for each of the organizations for like psychologists, for school counselors and so forth. And we far exceed them as far as where the recommendations are. There's no state requirement, but we definitely far exceed the amount that we or need to have. I mean, certainly you can always have more, but I think that where we've added the supports, these are what we consider to be our tier 3 supports that for our students. I mean, they're our highest level of interventions. I think our focus, which is the next, what we'll talk about in a minute, are some of the things we need to do with more that tier 1, tier 2, as far as looking at how we put some proactive supports in place. But you want to talk a little bit about some staff morale types of things that are taking place?
Yeah, we've touched on this a little bit earlier about just how important teachers are, obviously, and that staff morale and really just keeping the camaraderie here. And here are what we things that we've been doing over the past couple of months. And Dr. Sokolowski from his lead has allowed a couple of weeks of casual dress, which was certainly appreciated. We've done a lot of fall and spring SEL days at the building level for students, and also encouraging notes to staff. I received one this morning from Dr. Reynolds. I really appreciated that. It was a great pick-me-up on a Monday morning. And then using the hallways during the class period, and we also had some wonderful team-building exercises that we actually had Dr. Sokolowski kind of right where I was sitting, showing off his long snapping skills to really break the ice and really just get us an opportunity to gather and be able to get together and really have some good experiences in a difficult year.
So the major collaboration that has been taking place, and we're using some of our grant monies for this purpose, is our collaboration with the Tom Stecker Associates and the Chester County Intermediate Unit. And we've been working with Tom Stecker's group with our administrative team and even in our building levels over the last couple of years on kind of spot areas, not necessarily consistent across the board, but what we've done is really have a commitment for this year and next year to focus on social emotional learning that is for our students, for our families, for our teachers, our staff. Really important, kind of looking at it from all angles. Again, looking at that tier 1, tier 2, what's available for all students in our district. We have some of the things that we are looking at are 3 comprehensive behavioral health team trainings that took place earlier this year with our multi-tiered system of supports teams. There are connection days trainings that are taking place. We've had 3 of them. We were actually supposed to have one this week, but because of lack of substitutes, we've kind of pushed that off for a couple weeks to the beginning of February. We're focusing on a national model for our the social emotional learning skills, and that is being employed. Our next one is going to be talking about resiliency. The last one was talking about trauma and trauma-informed care. So each day has a theme, and we have a team in each of our buildings that are participating in these trainings. The next step will actually be taking core teams, which will be 4 half days that will take place in the spring, that a team of like 3 to 6 teachers in each of our buildings will participate and get a more in-depth overview of those social emotional learning areas. And that will continue next year till we get all of our staff trained to have a basic understanding of what social emotional learning is and what we can do. And what's really going to be nice about this training is it's going to turn around, like each time they have a training, they're going to learn something they can put in place the next day. Many of the things that are taking place in our connection teams, the activities that are taking place, buildings can turn around and doing with their faculty, they may be doing it with their students. It has really been very successful. It's really motivating to be here. I encourage you in February, on February 1st and 2nd, we are actually going to bring parents in, and they're going to be coming in to participate and get an overview of what we're doing, and then have an opportunity to meet with their building teams for lunch and hear what's happening in the building. So kind of, we started with our staff. I'm going to talk momentarily about our students, and we're now engaging our parents. We'll be doing a parent series in the evening during the spring as well to engage them, get their input, as well as share the work and what can we do to support them. This is a whole community. It's not a one place. It is, we're working with everyone in this. So I'm very excited about that. We actually have started today as an outgrowth of our connection team training. So a topic came up about gender identity and wanting to have more information. This afternoon we met with a gentleman from Scott Burton from Lehigh University, and he did an overview for secondary on gender identity. Really very, very well done. And on Thursday we'll do it for elementary. Anyone that is welcome is able to join. So you are certainly, as a board, welcome to join any of our connection team trainings. If you'd like to sit in on any of those, you're welcome to. I can certainly share those dates, and as we get the information as far as this parent trainings, we'll get that as well. So the third component, and I'll go into more in depth of that, I'll finish with that, is our students and how we're getting them involved. And we had a student voice day for our middle and high school students in December. That was phenomenal. Absolutely, it was just, oh my gosh, made my day. We are surveying. So what are we doing? What other data are we looking at? We surveyed our administrative team and our teaching staff. That information is being done with the Tom Stecker group. They will be analyzing it. Someone from the Tom Stecker group also did learning walks in all 16 of our buildings, and that looking for physical evidence of what's happening with our social emotional learning. They're going to compile that information as well as our student focus and our parent focus groups, and they will be giving us a report most likely in March to see where we're at, and that will help to drive and plan what our 22-23 year will look like. As I shared, we'll have the parent training series. To really help us for implementation, we're also contracting with the Chester County Intermediate Unit, and we have 3 full-time staff members that are helping in our buildings to make sure some of this is getting embedded, and how do we support the goals of in our buildings. Each building has a social emotional learning goal, and they are working closely. They're also helping with our student voices. Our students that in each of our buildings at the secondary level now have a team, and they have goals that they're going to be working on, and so they are helping in those areas. So we get into a little bit more when we had that student day. One of the activities they did was they asked to share 2 words that represent your community that you hope for. What's your wish for, that you look for? The bigger than the wording, the more that word came up throughout from the input. And we had from each, I'd say about 30 students participated in our middle school level and about the same in our high school. So supportive, safe, inclusive, understanding, accepting. That's what they wish for. Kindness, bully-free. That's what they wish. At our high school level, very similar to that as well, inclusive, understanding, non-judgmental, unity, connections, accepting, respect. Okay. We had some awesome students, and the principals were asked to look for students from diverse backgrounds that would be student influencers, and it was definitely just awesome groups. One of the activities, and I certainly won't read these, but I'll leave this up for a minute, was take a 6-word story. They worked in groups, and they could also do this individually. What represents what's been happening during this time period? And you can see, like, this is coming from them. This is at the high school level that this was completed, and it just kind of gives you an idea of where kids are. Wake up, open screen, sleep, repeat. And that was kind of talking about last year. Remote learning, introvert thriving, no people, lack of human contact breeds unrest. So just kind of a reflection of where they are. Then we asked them, though, let's take some of the things we talked about, our wishes and where we want to be, let's develop goals. And I gave you an example of one from the middle school and one from the high school. So I'll read the first, what will we do tomorrow? Create a bulletin board as a form of representation of all the different communities and people within our school and school district. Having a variety of diverse students create this would be a very good project on diversity and accepting others' opinions. So that's a goal of the middle school. Let me give you one from the high school. focusing on small acts of kindness to fill each other's glasses, saying hello in the halls, holding the door, decorate parking spots, Friday play music, quote of the day, funny joke, minute to win it, coffee and donuts to sell around school like Pretzel Fridays. So that's an example. So what our IU folks are doing is helping them say, like, those kids are motivated, they are excited, and they want to have this be expanded with other students. How can we keep that going? You know, our administrative staff is really stressed just to making sure that day-to-day we're operating. So they need help with this, and we really think that the IU can help work with their students to make sure these things happen. So that's just a small example, but I wanted to share some of the things that we are doing to respond to the situation that we are in. We can certainly at the end of the year circle back to say where we are and what our plans are for next year. But I know it's late, but if there are any questions, I'll certainly answer them.
I think there were questions 2.5 hours ago.
I'm sure, and you certainly can reach out to me at another time. If you do remember, Ms. Chester, at some point, Pupil Services was first and education was second. What happened with that? No, seriously, I will certainly, at any point, if anyone wants to know more about the things that were shared tonight, when you're less tired, we will certainly answer them. And again, you are welcome to any of our trainings that we have on social emotional learning.
Can you pass those dates out?
Sure, I will send them.
I think there's a lot to unpack here. At 10 o'clock, it might be late to unpack. But it's going to be real, when we circle back, I think that's going to be key to see how, we have music after a certain.
That was the alarm telling me to send my 7th grader to bed.
I thought they were telling me to get off the stage. But I think it'll be important to see what impact these interventions have. And I love the 6-word stories. And I have to tell you, I was thrown with the first one since I counted 5 words over and over again. But it was a slow game. But I'm really interested to see the impact that some of these interventions have. So we will circle that on.
Yeah, I just would share, Leanne, too, the very significant action steps that have been taken. But to your point, Joyce, what will be, I think, most important would be to measure and to find those different areas to measure insofar as the impact that's happening. And I think everyone knows that this SEL plan that we're undertaking, I don't know another district in Chester County or this area that is moving so extensively, honestly, quite aggressively. And what I recognize, and some of our parents have talked about this evening, that it's so important to provide that social and emotional safety so that students can do their best in the classroom.
And I think it's so important to involve not only the students, but the parents and the teachers and the staff.
Yeah, it's
So-
not just one
A lot of the strategies, they're not just strategies that would help support students, but they're also strategies that enhance your overall school community.
Correct.
That was one thing I did want to ask about on the staff morale slide. I'm really gratified to see that staff is being considered in this because I think you can't have happy kids if you have unhappy staff. Are these things that we've actually made contact with the staff with and said, what do you need? What would help you feel supported? What would improve morale?
Yes, and I think that was part of the survey that was done by Tom Stecker's group. There's specific questions that they asked, and we'll get that feedback. I think it's also done more informally with our principals and working directly with their faculty. We hear it when we have those connection days. It can go into much more in depth. We hear feedback from each of those buildings. So it comes from a variety of sources. And we'll also have the end of year survey that Bob will send out. That will be another piece. So trying to gather that understanding, and the motto has been, like we have, we know what we need to do, and there's like big goals that we need to accomplish, but we need to chunk it. What's manageable for people to be able to do? And it's okay. There's not, you have to reach this point by June. Everyone's kind of on a different trajectory, and that is okay. We're meeting people where they are in each of their buildings, in their goals, and trying to reinforce that. Whatever we do is moving in a positive direction. The angst we hear is we want to do this, we want to do more, we just don't have the ability to do it right now. And there's that conflict that we hear.
I think as a board too, we should make sure to acknowledge the parents and the staff as well, because they have to kind of keep a lot of balls in the air to to make all of this work. And, you know. So are there any other questions from the committee or the board?
I just want to say thank you for keeping kids alive, and that's the work that you do 24/7. And then thank you for somehow gathering enough energy to go above and beyond and really try and make this SEL come alive for everybody. And I know that you do intend it and are going to include and are including parents. Because at the building level, that's where teachers and parents have got to say, these are things we can do together. So, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ranieri, Dr. Warner, everybody that braved it out.